Marcus Green was a man of quiet depth, a man who understood the language of the earth. His family's land was not merely a plot. It was a living chronicle. The ancient oak by the creek was where his grandfather had proposed. The rolling hills whispered stories of harvest and family reunions. For Marcus, the deed, weathered and soft at the edges, was a sacred covenant. He walked the fence line every evening, a calm, solitary figure whose serenity was as deep as the soil under his feet. Across the paved road, the world was different. Crestview Estates was a monument to manicured perfection, where pristine lawns and identical facades stood in stark contrast to the wild, beautiful expanse of Marcus's inheritance. The gate was not just a physical barrier, but a symbol of the division its residents, particularly HOA President Linda Hartwell, fiercely maintained. Linda saw the world in terms of assets and aesthetics. To her, Marcus's land was an untidy blemish on the edge of her curated kingdom, a constant reminder of a world she couldn't control. She didn't see history or heritage. She saw potential. Potential for a new clubhouse, a golf course extension, or a row of exclusive villas. The fact that it belonged to a soft-spoken black man who seemed indifferent to her community's wealth was an irritant she could no longer abide. Their confrontation was as inevitable as it was brief. As Marcus inspected a section of old fencing, Linda approached, her heels sinking into the soft earth, a look of distaste fleeting across her sharply featured face. "You know, this land is wasted in your hands," she began, her voice sweet with a condescension that made the words sting. "People like you don't usually own property here. You'll sell it to us eventually." Marcus didn't flinch. He turned his calm gaze toward her, the setting sun catching the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. He had expected this, had felt the weight of her gaze for months. "This land isn't for sale," he stated, his voice even and soft, yet carrying the weight of granite. "Not now, not ever." Linda's laugh was a short, sharp sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Trust me," she said, the smirk returning. "You'll change your mind." But Marcus didn't, and that refusal was a spark. The real story began the following week. First, it was a formal letter from the Crestview Estates HOA, citing vague and absurd bylaws about visual blight and uncultivated vegetation. They demanded he landscape to community standards. Marcus filed the letter away, unread after the first paragraph. Then, the tactics escalated. The county suddenly received anonymous complaint about illegal dumping and zoning violations on his property. A stern inspector arrived, only to leave baffled, finding nothing but pristine wilderness in a well-kept, modest home. One morning, Marcus found a section of his fence torn down, the post splintered as if by a vehicle. He repaired it without a word. Linda was perplexed. His calm was a fortress she couldn't breach. She had expected anger or fear or eventually financial pressure to break him. Instead, he was an immovable object, rooted as deeply as the old oak tree. What Linda didn't know, what she had arrogantly failed to consider, was that Marcus's quiet was not passive. It was strategic. While she was orchestrating petty harassments, he was consulting with a non-profit land trust. He was having the soil tested, documenting the native flora and fauna, and quietly drafting a legally binding conservation easement. He was not just protecting his land from her. He was ensuring it would remain untouched for generations to come, forever shielding it from the reach of people like Linda Hartwell. The battle lines were drawn, not with shouts, but with silence and a will of iron. The war for soul of the land had begun, and Marcus Green was prepared to fight with the one weapon Linda could never understand. Months later, Marcus noticed heavy machinery rolling onto his property. Bulldozers, cement trucks, construction workers. At first, he thought it was a mistake, a simple trespass. When he asked one of the workers what was happening, the man shrugged and said, "We're building a luxury villa for the HOA president." She said this land was hers. Marcus was stunned. He immediately confronted Linda. "You're building on my property. You have no right." But Linda smirked again. "You don't have the money or power to fight me. By the time this villa is finished, it'll be too valuable for you to touch. I have lawyers, connections, and the HOA behind me. Face it, you'll lose." Marcus could have called the police or tried to stop the construction physically. But instead, He did something that shocked everyone. He stayed silent. He watched, his expression unreadable, as the machinery tore into the earth his grandfather had taught him to cherish. To Linda and her crew, his silence was surrender. They saw a man who had finally accepted his place. But they were wrong. Marcus's calm was not a void of action. It was the focus of it. He was not giving up. He was gathering strength. While the construction noise echoed, Marcus was quietly busy. He contacted a licensed land surveyor to come and formally restake the official boundary lines of his property. He hired a professional forensic document examiner to scrutinize his deed and the local land registry records, ensuring its chain of title was unbroken and ironclad. He reached out to a firm of forensic engineers, the kind often used in construction defect litigation, and hired them not to stop the build, but to document it. Every day, as the villa rose from the ground, a neutral third party was meticulously recording the entire process, the construction methods, the materials used, and precisely how much of the structure encroached onto his land. He knew that a rushed legal fight would drain his resources. Linda was right about one thing. She had more liquid capital and a team of lawyers on retainer. A protracted battle would be a war of attrition. He might not win. So, he chose a different path. He decided to let Linda build her entire mansion on his land. He was allowing her to make her crime, her trespass, infinitely more valuable and undeniable. His plan was not to stop the construction, but to let it become the evidence that would undo her. He was gathering a case for what is known in legal terms as trespass of land and unjust enrichment. By letting the villa be completed, the violation transformed from an abstract dispute over a patch of dirt into a concrete, multi-million-dollar asset illegally sitting on his property. The courts could then be asked not just for damages, but for a much more powerful remedy, the removal of the structure at the trespasser's expense. Or, in some scenarios, the transfer of the title of the building itself to the landowner. Marcus understood a truth that Linda, in her arrogance, could not. The law, for all its delays, has a long memory and a heavy hand. He would not fight her on the battlefield she had chosen. He would wait until her dream home was complete, until every last tile was laid and every fixture was installed, and then he would present his impeccable evidence. He would force her to explain to a judge why her luxury villa, her crown jewel, was built on stolen ground. His silence was a patient, gathering storm that would eventually reclaim everything. For the next year, the all-might cacophony of construction became the soundtrack to Marcus's life. He watched, a silent sentinel from his porch, as Linda Hartwell poured her ambition and millions into building her sprawling dream villa. The skeleton of steel and with grooved flesh of imported Italian marble and glass. An infinity pool was carved into the hillside, its blue tile mirroring the sky, and massive glass chandeliers were hoisted into place, glittering like alien stars against the natural landscape. The massive $6 million structure was a monument to opulence, rising defiantly from the very soil Marcus's grandfather had once worked with his hands. In Crestview Estates, the villa became a spectacle. Neighbors would pause their evening walks to gaze at the progress, murmuring with a mixture of awe and unease. It's breathtaking, but why would she build it so close to the property line? Some would whisper. Others, more brazen, would ask, is that even on her land? But the questions never reached Linda's ears. Fear of her influence and a desire to maintain the community's placid surface kept them hushed. They saw a powerful woman building her legacy. They didn't see the crime unfolding in plain sight. Marcus's own friends and family were less restrained. His cousin, Jamal, would visit weekly, his frustration boiling over. Marcus, she's stealing your land right in front of you. Don't just sit there. We can get a petition, call the news, something. Another friend, a more pragmatic contractor, offered to bring his own crew and tear down the encroaching fence. Just say the word, man. But Marcus would only take a slow sip of his iced tea, his eyes never leaving construction site. His reply was a calm, infuriating mantra. Patience. Let her finish. What they couldn't see was a meticulous, silent war Marcus was waging from his study. His apparent inaction was, in fact, a masterclass in strategic preparation. The day after the first bulldozer arrived, he had already retained Eleanor Vance, a razor-sharp property attorney known for taking on David and Goliath cases against corporate developers. "Don't stop them, Ms. Vance," he had instructed calmly. "Document them." And so they did. While Linda focused on marble slabs and waterfall faucets, Marcus and his lawyer were building an impregnable fortress of paper. He retrieved the original, sepia-toned deed from his grandfather's time, its language poetic and firm. He gathered every subsequent title transfer, a clean, unbroken chain of inheritance leading directly to him. He pulled years of tax records, each receipt a timestamp of his unwavering ownership. Most crucially, he hired a licensed surveyor, not to confront the workers, but to quietly, professionally restake the official boundary lines with GPS precision. The surveyor's report, stamped and notarized, included time-stamped photographs showing the villa's foundation and the infinity pool clearly, indisputably, over the line. Eleanor Vance guided him through every step. "The more she builds, the greater the trespass," she explained, a grim smile in her voice. "We're not just dealing with a boundary dispute anymore. This is a case of unjust enrichment and intentional trespass. The court can order the complete removal of the structure at her expense." Marcus wasn't just waiting. He was allowing Linda to dig her own financial grave. He was permitting her to transform a simple land grab into a multi-million-dollar liability. Every truckload of marble, every imported tile, was another brick in the case against her. He stored the documents in a fireproof box, but the real evidence stood proudly in the sun, a gleaming, arrogant mistake. The villa was no longer just her dream home. It was his ultimate weapon, and it was almost ready for him to use. Marcus stood calmly at the gated entrance, the very one Linda had installed on the land her own surveyor had, perhaps deliberately misrepresented. He held a leather folder, worn at the edges but bulging with the weight of history and law. Inside was not just a single deed, but a complete case, a narrative of ownership so airtight it could withstand any bluster Linda could muster. The folder contained the original, sepia-toned deed from his grandfather, a document that spoke of a time when a man's word and his land were his bond. Beneath it were the crisp, modern pages of the quiet title action his attorney, Eleanor Vance, had successfully pursued in the Superior Court of the county. The court had appointed a special master, a neutral third party, to investigate the claims. Their report, now part of the file, had found Marcus's title to be clear, unambiguous, and superior to any other claim. The judge's final decree, a formal declaration from the state of Georgia, had quieted all other challenges, establishing Marcus Green as the undisputed legal owner. When Linda sneered, "What are you doing here? This is private property," Marcus didn't just state a fact. He presented evidence. He opened the folder and displayed the certified copies of the land deed, signed and sealed by the county registrar, alongside the final court order from the quiet title action. The confirmation from the county officer, a guest at the party, was the final, public nail in the coffin of Linda's scheme. Yes, according to official records in the recent court order, Marcus Green is the rightful owner of this land. This entire villa sits on his property. As the crowd gasped, Linda screamed, "What? No, that can't be right. I spent millions," was more than an outburst of rage. It was a confession of her fundamental error. She believed money and influence could supersede the law. Marcus's calm reply, "You did, but you built it on land that isn't yours," underscored the legal reality she had ignored. The legal road ahead. While Marcus's declaration that "everything you built now belongs to me" is a powerful, dramatic moment, the precise legal outcome will be determined by the courts. Marcus's successful quiet title action has already established him as the legal owner. Now he has several potential paths, guided by his attorney: trespass and unjust enrichment. Marcus can sue Linda for intentional trespass. By building without permission on his land, she may be liable for damages. The court could also apply the principle of unjust enrichment, preventing Linda from benefiting from her wrongful act. Seeking a remedy, a judge could order several remedies. They might grant Marcus ownership of the villa, force Linda to remove the structure at her own expense, or order Linda to pay Marcus the full market value of the land and the improvements she made. Marcus's year and a half of silent, strategic patience allowed Linda to construct the very evidence that secured his victory. His quiet title action ensured his ownership was legally unassailable, turning her $6 million villa into a monument to her own arrogance and his profound, unshakable legacy. The gavel's crack in the wood-paneled courtroom was not just a sound. It was a period at the end of a long, arrogant sentence Linda Hartwell had written for herself. The legal battle was swift and merciless. Marcus's documentation was a fortress. The chain of title was unbroken. The surveyor's report was irrefutable, and the time-stamped photographic evidence, compiled over 18 months of silent observation, painted a devastating picture of deliberate trespass. Linda's lawyers, relying on bluster and procedural delays, found no cracks in Marcus's case. They argued about good faith and mistaken boundaries, but the judge saw the truth with stark clarity. The ruling was unequivocal. The land and every improvement upon it, every marble tile, every pane of glass, the infinity pool, the custom cabinetry, legally belonged to Marcus Green. The principle of annexation was clear. When a trespasser permanently attaches their property to the land of another, it belongs to the landowner. The day of the key transfer was a study in contrasts. Linda, her face a pale mask of simmering fury, was forced to hand over the keys to her dream villa. The physical act was a form of public undressing. The neighbors who had once envied her now watched from behind their blinds, their whispers no longer of admiration, but of derision. The arrogance, one muttered. To think she could just take what wasn't hers, said another. Her social capital, built on a foundation of perceived power and influence, evaporated overnight. Marcus accepted the keys without a word of gloating. He felt no thrill of vengeance, only the quiet satisfaction of justice served and a legacy secured. He looked at the multi-million-dollar structure not as a trophy, but as a tool. Instead of selling it, a decision that surprised many, he engaged a luxury property manager. The substantial rental income from the villa became a river of capital, which he deliberately channeled back into the community that had been his family's home for generations. He established a scholarship fund at the local high school, created a grant program for small black-owned businesses, and funded the restoration of a historic community center. The villa, a monument to Linda's selfish ambition, was transformed into an engine for collective uplift. What she intended as her personal empire became, in Marcus's hands, a victory for his entire community. The story, too resonant to remain local, spread like wildfire. Online, the headline was brutal and perfect. HOA president loses $6 million mansion after building on wrong land. It was shared thousands of times, a modern-day fable for the digital age. Comment sections filled with applause for the quiet man who won, and the tale became a cautionary one about the perils of overreach. The lesson was etched into the narrative for all to see. Arrogance and entitlement are brittle, destined to shatter against the bedrock of patience, wisdom, and truth. Marcus had understood that the most powerful force is not the one that shouts the loudest, but the one that can wait, prepare, and allow its opponent to build the very structure of their own downfall. He had protected his grandfather's land, and in doing so, had sown seeds of opportunity that would nourish his community for years to come.